Okay, hello and good evening to everyone. As always, Monday evening, we have our live coaching sessions. Hello to everyone here on Discord. And as always, if you have questions, please feel free to jump in. The topic for today is, I think, not so long walkthrough through the new features of the last release. It's about managing data of multiple drivers in the various tools of Simulator Controller, and also how you can manage your telemetry database, export, import data, delete data, and so on. This has yeah, it's missing from the other sessions for Strategy Workbench or Team Server because the feature is quite new. So I decided to make a dedicated session for this. Okay, as always, I have the applications that are relevant here on the screen. Let's start with simulator configuration. And let's talk a little bit about where the driver information finally comes from. There are, in the end, two different sources where the system gets information about the current driver. First one is yourself, to say it so. When you run a simulator controller and you are in a simulation and you are collecting data with the race assistance, the system knows your identity because you've set your name, your driver name in the simulation. And also, the system always have an identity key for you as a driver. This identity key, you can find it in your local documents folder, in the simulator controller folder, in the config folder. There is a small file, it's a text file named ID. It only contains one line. You can open it with the text editor, and here you see your identity key. This identity key is automatically generated during the installation of Simulator Controller, and it's used from there on to identify you and your data in all data collections, and also if you share your data with the community. I think you know the consent which you can give to share pressure data or setup information with the community. All this sharing is done using this identity key. And with the last release, this key is also used to identify the data in the telemetry database. Each and every item which is stored there now is marked with this ID. And the system also collects the driver names which occur during your sessions with this ID. Why driver names in plural? Because you might change your name in your simulator settings. For example, I myself sometimes drive under the pseudonym The Big O, but sometimes I also drive under my clear name, Oliver Uvik. So the system collects my different driver names and store them in the database under this key. So the other way to get information about drivers into your database is when you are running team races and, for example, managing your teams using the team server. And as you can see, let's take a look at this team. It's quite large, a couple of drivers, 6 different drivers. And when you are running team races and are connected to the team server, all data which will be created during this team race will also be identified using the IDs of the different drivers that are part in this session. So when you're doing this, your database will be populated with data from different drivers. When you are using simulator controller only for yourself, then the data is only from you, which is obvious. But if you're running team races, your database will be populated with data from different drivers. Let's take a short look how this will look like in the database itself. For example, if you go to ACC, then select the car. Where is it? My car. Um, let's take a look here. Sanford. No, that's not correct. Let's take a different one. This one here. Okay. Okay, here you can see this. These are lines from the database, and here you have a key for one driver, and here's a key for another driver. So you have different information here for different drivers. Okay, that's the low-level basics. Now we can work with the data. And typically you will have two tools where you can work with this data and investigate it. The race center, let's start with this one, with which you are running your team races. I will load a session from the last weekend. It's a stored one. Select. Okay, quite a couple of laps, 180 laps. And if you select, for example, here the pressure graph, you can now choose from which driver you want to see the data here. And currently selected all, which means the graphs will show the data from all drivers, but you can focus, for example, only on me as a driver. And you see here, this is the first stint. No, not the first. It starts with lap 40. It's the second stint. The third stint was driven by the other driver. Then I retake the car and drive another stint. And if we switch to the other driver, you will see the data for the first stint and third stint and fifth stint. So now you can focus on the data of each driver using this drop-down menu. The same is true for the strategy workbench. Here you can use the data, but in a more convenient way auch to create strategies. Let's take a look here at, I think, what, Laguna Seca. Okay, we have some tire data, pressure data from the last sessions. Also here we can focus on the different drivers. And what you can also do here is now using this data, simulate strategies using different pre-selected stint drivers, which is new for the last release. You see here a new tab where you can now, before you run a strategy simulation, set up a stint plan, a kind of predominant stint plan. Let's do it here. Choose another driver. Okay, and yet another one. meme again, and yet another one. It's Hayo again. Now we will create a 4-hour race and run the simulation from the telemetry data. And you can see 4 pit stops. The drivers are now pre-selected here. You have different stint timings. Hayo is a little bit faster than me, which you can see here. He's half a second, no, more than a second faster according to the data. And he's running 3 stints, the 4th and the 5th, because he has been marked here as last driver for all stints coming after the last one, after the 4th one. If we select a different driver here for the 5th stint, it's me again, and rerun the simulation, you will have me as the driver for the last stint. So what the system is doing is quite obvious. It selects the data according to the driver which you have chosen here, and it will use only the data for the driver you have chosen, using lap time, lap time data, tire degradation data, and so on, when the data is available. You can still run a simulation for different drivers, even if you don't have any data available for the driver. But then the data taken for the different values like lap time, consumption, tire degradation, and so on will be calculated from the grand average over all the data, which might or not might be correct.
Oliver,
Yes.
can I ask a question? How can
Yeah.
you select a driver that you don't have data for in a stint plan?
No, you can't.
Okay.
You can't.
But how can you then set an unknown driver in your plan?
Okay. There is a trick I will show you. In your database, in the top level folder for one of the simulators, there's a drivers file. If you open it, you will see here 2 lines. It's very simple. The key, forename, surname, and nickname. That's it. And if you really want to, you could create a line with a text editor. But the key you set here will never be the key from the real key from your teammate unless he gives it to you. But when he is willing to give you the key, there's a better way to do this. We will come to this later on. So I don't recommend to directly edit this file. Okay, so now let's set this as the race strategy for the next race. And let's go to the oh, now it will load an old session, will take some time. Now let's go here to the test day and use the strategy we just created. Clear the session. Yes. Load current race strategy. That's the strategy we created with the workbench. And now if you create the stint plan from this strategy, there will be normally, okay, that's not correct here. So it is correct. In the team Vivid Global Racing, the driver Hajo Horman is unknown. So we need to go to a different team. And select also the test day. I hope it's there as a session. Quite a large session, still loading the data. So if you try to load a strategy into a team where the driver is not part of, as you have seen, the race center will create this the stint plan, but will empty those stints where the driver is unknown. Okay, so now we can go to test day. Still loading some data here. Okay, clear. And now retry it. Load current race strategy and create the plan, and here is it. Because in the team Vivid Global Racing Blue, you can't see this now. Here's an extension. Hajo Horman is a team member. So that's for working with the drivers. Now let's take a look how you can work with your database. And I think this will answer your question, so your previous question. In the session database tool, we have a new section which is named administration. When you select simulator, you can now open the administration page where you can have a look at all the data which is available according to this selection. Currently, all the data which is available for Assetto Corsa Competizione for different car track combinations. Everything I have driven here is recorded in my database, but you can also focus on individual cars, for example. There is no data for which this car, only 2 track information. Where's the other one? I think here. Okay, for the new Porsche Cup, we have quite a few laps with a couple of telemetry data. For example, for Spa, we have 160 entries in the telemetry database, and now we can select here what we want to delete or export. Delete, okay, might be sometimes a good idea to remove very old data, but for now we will stick to export. If you now press here export, you will be asked a root folder where the exported information will be written. In the documentation, you can read that inside this root folder, a new folder will be created with the export information. So it's fine to select desktop, for example. I've done this. And now he has created this export folder. It's always named export and then date information, date and time when the export has taken place. And if you take a look in there, there is a meta file, meta information file, and yes, the exported data. Quite easy. And here you have now an exported information for my data for laps I have driven using the Cup Porsche on Spa as, yeah, me as a driver. And for example, if I send you this export folder, Peter, you can import this data into your database. And from now on, I am a known driver in your database, and the labs or the telemetry data you imported from this export folder will be marked with my driver ID, and then you can work with me as a driver in the combination for the Cup Porsche and Spa Francorchamps, for example. You can create strategies for this combination with me as a team member. Okay, now let's create a big export package, which will take some time. I export my complete database for Assetto Corsa Competizione. It's running. It will take, let's say, 30 seconds or 40 seconds to export all the data. You can't see this. The progress bar has opened on my main screen, so you can't see the progress bar at the moment. 50% done. %75 done.
Oliver, just one question in
Yep.
between.
Yeah.
When can you remember or remind me when the system collects this data? Is this in practice sessions and in races?
It depends. The default is that he will collect data in practice and in race, but that's only the default. You can change this. I will show you in a few moments when I've finished this one how you can change this. Okay. Now we have export package for my complete Assetto Corsa Competizione data, which is around, I think, a megabyte of data. Yeah, 1.5 megabyte of data. And I'm brave, which means I will delete my Audi data from my database. Delete it. Okay, it's gone. And now I say import. Select my export package. And he comes up with a browser with all the data available in this export package. I will deselect everything and will only select the Audi data, say OK, and it's back here again. So that's the way to do it. You can export data, zip it, send it to your teammate, your team engineer, let's so to say, and he will import it into his database and can work with all the data from all team members and create strategies from this and so on. Okay, so coming back to your question, what you can do here is in the race settings you have the possibility to change the defaults for this when the telemetry data is collected. I will create a new item here, which has been added at the end, and here you have data options, and here you can say, okay, I want to collect tire pressures also during qualification. The default is off, but I will do it. From now on, the race engineer will ask you at the end of the qualification sessions if you want to store your tire pressures. Maybe not so a good idea while during a qualification you run a quite aggressive setup, which might have different tire pressures than your normal setup. So maybe you don't want to do this, but you can. And you can store this settings as always, not only at the main level for the complete simulator, but also you can restrict it to a single car or a single track or a single weather combination, as always. All these settings are yeah, kind of restricted to the choices you made here. Okay. Let me think about it, but I'm quite sure that's it. Yeah, that's it about working with data from multiple drivers. Any questions remaining? Seems not. So fine, then I will stop the session now and see you next week.